I'm an American citizen. Paul was a Roman citizen. Most of the folks who watch my videos, I say most, there are some who don't. I've spoken with some who don't, who aren't an American citizen, I'm sorry. Mine's a little cloudy this morning, still morning. But most of you are American citizens. Are you proud to be an American? You shouldn't be. I'm going to reveal to you today some terrible, terrible things of America's past, and you thought you knew America's past. You have no idea. And some of America's dubious past is very recent. I'll point this out to you in just a few minutes. I want to point this particular scripture here. Now, I know there are a lot of people who claim United States of America is that great Babylon of Revelation 18. No, it is not. Rome and the religious system in the Vatican that spreads throughout all of Christianity is that Babylon the Great. And attached to Rome, the system of Christianity spreads its tentacles throughout almost all of so-called civilized world. Let's see here. Which one is this? This was verse 24. So Revelation 18 verse 24, starting in verse 21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the Yam, to the Mediterranean Sea. You know what would happen if a messenger from heaven did that literally, don't you? Do you realize the tsunamis and the displacement of water such an event would generate? And then you wonder why later in the book of Revelation he said when he saw the holy city, he saw no Yam. Means he saw no Mediterranean Sea. I wonder why. Let's continue. Cast into the sea, into the Yam, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall no more be found at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more in all of you. No craftsman or whatever craft shall be found any more in any of you. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in you. And the light of a candle shall shine no more. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more. And your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorceries were all the what? The Gentiles. The Gentiles. What is sorceries? For by your pharmakia, big pharma, by big pharma. By big pharma were all the Gentiles deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets If you read book of Matthew carefully, you will see that Yehoshua called his disciples, the 12 apostles, his prophets. And then there were two more coming at the time of the end, to bring all Israel back home, the two witnesses. Those also are prophets that is yet to come. And they will be murdered by who? Well, you can see it here. And of the Kodesh, which are the Jews, and everyone that was slain upon the earth. So everyone who is murdered upon the earth, their blood is now upon that great city Babylon. The great city Babylon, aka Rome, the Vatican, its religious tentacles that reaches out to the four corners of the earth. Everyone that was slain upon the earth, their bloodstains are on the hands of this. And also her sorceries, her big pharma. Now I have read to you this little piece of The Horrifying American Roots of Nazi Eugenics. And those of you who have not read it, you should read it, by Edwin Black. I'm not going to take the time to read it to you again today. But once you read it, you will realize that curses are going to come upon the United States of America, just like curses are going to come upon Rome itself. And if you love this country, you are the problem. And then there was a commentary in the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health. And here they're criticizing. They're acknowledging that what he's saying is true, but then they criticize him. This is by Jeff L. Elliott, Honorary Research Advisor at the School of History, Philosophy, Religion, and Classics. Eugenics is too frequently overlooked in history of both the United States and Europe, even though the story is a fascinating and important one. The field to date has remained largely the preserve of academic historians, despite obvious connections to contemporary debates around science and ethics. These were prime motivations for War Against the Weak, Edwin Black's timely look at American eugenics and its impact on Nazism. It's a good book. Black's earlier book, IBM and the Holocaust, traced the role of the information technology company IBM in creating Nazi Germany's punch card technology for classifying victims of Nazi genocide. War Against the Weak continues the theme. The United States was a major contributor to Nazi genocide, and indeed it was. And if you read this particular article that I just showed you here, there is no denying that it's true. Now this guy goes and claims, well, all of these countries were all responsible for their own, coming up with their own genocidal ideas, and they were. Just like any, what do we call that today? Somebody who aids and abets a murderer, or somebody who's complicit with murder is the same as the murderer himself. It's one and the same. War Against the Weak continues the theme that the United States was a major contributor to Nazi genocide. It was, but considerably overstates the case by shoehorning evidence into the argument that all European eugenics movement, including the German, was merely offshoots of American eugenics. Not merely, folks. Why is this guy claiming that those who are partners in crime are not just as guilty? Created in Britain in 1883 by Sir Francis Galton. Look, Charles Darwin's cousin. This guy, Edwin Black, talks about Sir Francis Galton as if this guy, this here fella, is claiming that is insinuating that Edwin Black did not talk about him. Well, it's right there in the article. Charles Darwin's cousin, eugenics became reality in the United States before the rise of Nazism. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Charles Darwin, too. They're teaching Darwinism in schools, even in United States public schools, even this very day. And Darwinism goes hand in hand with eugenics. Eugenics became reality in the United States before the rise of Nazism. Spurious scientific and medical work by eugenicists led to the forced sterilization of 60,000 Americans and banning of ethnically mixed marriages in many states. A eugenically inspired Immigration Act in 1924 kept out millions of Slavs, Jews, and others who were subsequently killed by Nazi Germany's eugenically inspired genocide. That all is true. Edwin Black properly shows that eugenics was more than about just ethnicity and disability by discussing class, intelligence, crime, poverty, sexuality, alcoholism, and prostitution. I want you to listen to this carefully. And you stop and think about what's going on around you right now. With the U.S. government in extreme national debt. Eugenics was also fundamentally about saving taxpayer dollars. While factually accurate at the level of interpretation, Black's work is fatally flawed. All right, let me ask you a question. If somebody's statement is factually accurate, how can it be fatally flawed? It's not possible, because the truth is the truth. So, he's admitting that Edwin Black told the truth, which now you will know that this guy who wrote this particular article is a liar. He's trying to cover something up. He interprets history with benefits of hindsight. Hindsight is always 20/20. We all know this. And he's questioning hindsight? Really? Seeing all events leading inexorably to eugenically inspired genocide and blaming those who could not see it at the time. What do you mean, those who could not see it at the time? Maybe he should rephrase it with those who refused to acknowledge it at the time. Edwin Black is also an has an America-centric worldview. Doesn't every American citizen? He denies the existence of a vibrant German movement before American money arrived after the First World War. He misses the reality that Germany had a movement following its own course. No, he didn't. He did not miss that reality. While American eugenics moved from extreme to subtle, the German movement went the other way, ending in genocide. No, the truth is, the Germans rode on a faster horse to genocide. I will prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you. If Black has substantial evidence for his claim that Hitler's emergence in 1924 led to an equal partnership between the U.S. and German eugenics movements, this fundamentally changes the history of eugenics in both countries and deserves far more than a sentence buried deep in the book. Oh, all right. I'm going to give that to you today, folks. Not just a mouthful, but the whole damn meal. Edwin Black claims that British eugenics was almost completely imported from the United States. While Britain thankfully did not enact any major pieces of eugenics legislation, it did have an independent and vigorous eugenics movement through the period. Whereas American eugenics focused on disability and ethnicity, Britain's eugenics movement was class-oriented and led overwhelmingly from the Bloomsbury and Fabian left. All right, and experts on the history of eugenics will find plenty to argue with in War Against the Weak. Nevertheless, the book should open an important field to a new audience. The relevance to contemporary scientific, genetic, and ethical issues is impossible to ignore. So why are you trying to ignore it, fellow? Edwin Black warns of the dangers, especially of linking economic and financial policy to science, which is what's happening right now. In the good old USA, the land that you love. The reader is rightly left wondering whether eugenics has gone away entirely. And I will prove to you today that it is alive and well. Are you ready? Let's go. This is, you can see the link right here, and if I can remember, I'll post a link. A history of secret human experimentations. This is very, very long, and it's 9 pages long. All about the United States history of secret human experimentations. And if you listen to this whole thing, if you read to this whole thing, you will wonder if the United States government was responsible for HIV, human papillomavirus, and all kinds of other nasty viruses that are out there today. You will wonder. 1931, Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, under the auspices of the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Investigations, here we go, Rockefeller Foundation comes up first. Investigations infect human subjects with cancer cells. Cancer cells. He later goes on to establish the U.S. Army biological warfare facilities in Maryland, Utah, and Panama, and is named to the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. This is how they hide these people. While there, he begins a series of radiation exposure experiments on American soldiers and civilian hospital patients. So you want to get treatment at a hospital. Do so at your own risk. Oh, you think things like this don't happen anymore? Really? There is an article. I don't want to get too far away from this because I need to stick to this right here, but Judge finds hospital contempt of court. Ah, yes. Judge fines, I can't pronounce that name, hospital $10,000 a day for refusing COVID-19's patient request for ivermectin. 19 hours ago. This is in Virginia. Oh, this is posted 3 days ago. Okay. All right. 1932. We all know about this. The Tuskegee syphilis study begins. 200 black men diagnosed with syphilis are never told of their illness, are denied treatment, and instead are used as human guinea pigs in order to follow progression and symptoms of the disease. They all subsequently die from syphilis. Their families never told that they could have been treated. The pellagra incident in 1935, after millions of individuals die from pellagra over a span of 2 decades, the U.S. Public Health Service finally acts to stem the disease. The director of the agency admits it had known for at least 20 years that pellagra is caused by a niacin deficiency, but failed to act since most of the deaths occurred within poverty-stricken black populations. 1940. 400 prisoners in Chicago are infected with malaria in order to study the effects of the new experimental drugs to combat the disease. Nazi doctors later, on trial at Nuremberg, cite this American study to defend their own actions during the Holocaust. Now, you must remember that some of these scientists were hanged, while the Americans who were doing the same thing got away scot-free. I want you to remember and understand that Jehovah, the Elohim of Israel, He is vengeful. These sins are piled up in the great stack of sins that are piled to the sky, and Jehovah is going to remember every one of these iniquities when He comes to bring judgment against this great whore. 1942, Chemical Warfare Services begins mustard gas experiments on approximately 4,000 servicemen. The experiment continues until 1945, and they use Seventh-day Adventists who chose to become human guinea pigs rather than to serve on active duty. 1943, in response to Japan's full-scale germ warfare, the U.S. begins research on biological weapons at Fort Detrick, Maryland. 1944, U.S. Navy uses human subjects to test gas masks and clothing. Individuals were locked in a chamber and exposed to mustard gas and lewisite. What does that mean? Anyway, 1945, Project Paperclip is initiated. The U.S. State Department, Army Intelligence, and CIA recruit Nazi scientists and offer them immunity and secret identities in exchange for work at top-secret government projects in the United States. 1945, Program F is implemented by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. This is the most extensive U.S. study of the health effects of fluoride. You know, fluoride, what they put in your water. You probably should have a filter to filter out your water of that crap, which is a key chemical component in atomic bomb production. One of the most toxic chemicals known to man. Fluoride is found causes marked adverse effects in the central nervous system, but much of the information is squelched in the name of national security because of fears that lawsuits could undermine full-scale production of atomic bombs. 1946, patients in VA hospitals are used as guinea pigs for experiments in order to allay suspicions. The order is given to change the word experiments to investigations or observations. So folks, remember, when they use the word investigations and observations is probably more like experimentations. Whenever reporting a medical study performed in one of the nation's veteran hospitals. 1947, Colonel E. Kirkpatrick of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission issues a secret document, January 8, 1947, stating that the agency will begin administering intravenous doses of radioactive substances to human subjects. 1947, the CIA begins its study of LSD as a potential weapon for use by American intelligence. Human subjects, both civilian and military, are used with and without their knowledge. And without their knowledge. So, you must ask the question, are such things happening today without their knowledge? Well, you can be sure that's what's going on today. 1950, Department of Defense begins plans to detonate nuclear weapons in desert areas and monitor downwind residents for medical problems and mortality rates. 1950, in an experiment to determine how susceptible an American city would be to biological attack, the U.S. Navy sprays a cloud of bacteria from ships over San Francisco. Monitoring devices are situated throughout the city in order to test the extent of infection. Many residents became ill with pneumonia-like symptoms. Well, imagine that. And then they wonder where COVID came from. 1951, Department of Defense begins open-air tests using disease-producing bacteria and viruses. Tests last through 1969, and there is concern that people in surrounding areas have been exposed. 1953, the U.S. military releases clouds of zinc-cadmium sulfide gas over Winnipeg, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Fort Wayne, the Monocacy River Valley in Maryland, and Leesburg, Virginia. Their intent is to determine how efficiently they could disperse chemical agents. Joint Army, Navy, CIA experiments are conducted in which tens of thousands of people in New York and San Francisco are exposed to airborne germs, Serratia, I can't pronounce these bacterias. Okay. Tens of thousands of people in New York and San Francisco. 1953, CIA initiates Project MK Ultra. This is an 11-year research program designed to produce and test drugs and biological agents that would be used for mind control and behavior modifications. 6 of the sub-project involve testing the agents on unwitting human beings. The CIA, in an experiment to test its ability to infect human population with biological agents, released a bacteria withdrawn from the Army's biological warfare arsenal over Tampa Bay, Florida. Oh, I need to post this one and send this to my friend. In Tampa. 1955, Army Chemical Corps continues LSD research studying its potential use in a chemical incapacitating agent. More than 1,000 Americans participate in the tests, which continue until 1958. 1956, the U.S. military releases mosquitoes infected with yellow fever over Savannah, Georgia and Avon Park, Florida. Following each test, Army agents posing as public health officials test victims for effects. 1958, LSD is tested on 95 volunteers at the Army's chemical warfare laboratories for its effect on intelligence. 1960, the Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence authorizes field testings of LSD in Europe and in the Far East. Testing the European population is codenamed Project Third Chance. Testing of the Asian population is codenamed Project Derby Hat. 1965, Project CIA and Department of Defense begin Project MK Search. Should read CIA and Department of Defense begin Project MK Search, a program to develop a capability to manipulate human behavior through the use of mind-altering drugs. And so you wonder, who is responsible for drug addiction in the United States and around the world? Look no further than your own government. 1965, prisoners at the Holmesburg State Prison in Philadelphia are subject to dioxin, the highly toxic chemical component of Agent Orange used in Vietnam. The men are later studied for development of cancer, which indicates that Agent Orange has been a suspected carcinogen all along. 1966, CIA initiates Project MK Often, a program to test toxicological effects of certain drugs on humans and animals. 1966, U.S. Army dispenses Bacillus subtilis variant Niger throughout the New York City subway system. More than 1 million civilians are exposed when Army scientists drop light bulbs filled with bacteria onto ventilation grates. How do you like your government now? 1967, the CIA and Department of Defense implement Project MK Naomi, successor to the MK Ultra, designed to maintain, stockpile, and test biological and chemical weapons. 1968, the CIA experiments with the possibility of poisoning drinking water by injecting chemicals into a water supply of the FBA into Washington, D.C. 1969, Dr. Robert McMahon of the Department of Defense requests from Congress $10 million to develop within 5 to 10 years a synthetic biological agent of which no natural immunity exists. (1970) Funding for the synthetic biological agent is obtained under H.R. 15090. The project, under the supervision of the CIA, is carried out by the Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick, the Army's top secret biological weapons facilities. Speculation is raised that the molecular biology techniques are used to produce AIDS-like retroviruses. So, here is the question. Where did HIV really come from? I think you know the answer. 1970. The United States intensifies its development of ethnic weapons. This is 1970, folks! Military Review, November 1970, designed to selectively target and eliminate specific ethnic groups who are susceptible due to genetic differences and variations in DNA. Are you proud to be an American? Still. Oh, you are? Let's continue. 1975, the virus section of Fort Detrick Center for Biological Warfare Research is renamed Frederick Cancer Research Facilities and is placed under the supervision of the National Cancer Institute. It is here that a special virus cancer program is initiated by the U.S. Navy, purportedly to develop cancer-causing viruses like HPV, human papilloma virus. It is here that retrovirologists isolate a virus to which no immunity exists. It is later named HTLV, human T-cell leukemia virus. Oh, leukemia as well. Viruses that cause leukemia. 1977, Senate hearings on health and scientific research confirmed that 239 populated areas had been contaminated with biological agents between 1949 and 1969 in some of the areas including San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Key West, Panama City, Minneapolis, and St. Louis. So you want to live in the big cities? 1978, experimental hepatitis B vaccine trials conducted by the CDC begins in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Ads for research subjects specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual men. I wonder if they were given HIV. 1981, first case. Oh, well, look what we have here. 1981, the first cases of AIDS are confirmed in homosexual men in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, triggering the speculation that AIDS might have been introduced via the hepatitis vaccine. Well, what do we have here? (1985), according to the journal Science, a fatal sheep virus, very similar, indicating a close taxonomic and evolutionary relationship. I don't know what this means. 1986, according to the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, HIV and VISNA are highly similar and share all structural elements except for the small segment which is nearly identical to HTLV. This leads to speculation that HTLV and VISNA may have been linked to produce a new retrovirus which has no natural immunity exists, talking about HIV. That they may have created HIV using VISNA and HTLV. Are you proud to be an American? Oh, you are? Let's continue. A report to Congress reveals that U.S. government's current generations of biological agents includes modified viruses, naturally occurring toxins, and agents are altered through genetic engineering to change immunological character and prevent treatment by all existing vaccines. They knew that there was no vaccine that could cure coronavirus. So why are they forcing people to take them? For the love of money is the root of every kind of evil, Paul said to Timothy. 1987, the Department of Defense admits that despite a treaty banning research and development of biological weapons, it continues to operate research facilities at 127 facilities and universities around the nation. This is 1987. Well, we don't do those things anymore, they say. What do I say? Bullshit. 1990, more than 1,500 6-month-old black and Hispanic babies in Los Angeles are given an experimental measles vaccine that has never been licensed for the use in the United States. The CDC later admits that their parents were never informed that the vaccine being injected to the children were experimental. I wonder what happened to those children. 1994, with a technique called gene tracking. Gene tracking, eh? Dr. Garth Nicholson at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas, discovered that many returning Desert Storm veterans are infected with an altered strain of Mycoplasma incognitus, a microbe commonly used in the production of biological weapons. Incorporated into its molecular structure are 40% of HIV protein code, indicating that this strain was man-made. 1994, Senator John D. Rockefeller issues a report revealing that for at least 50 years, the Department of Defense has used hundreds of thousands of military personnel in human experiments and for intentional exposure to dangerous substances. Materials including mustard gas, nerve gas, ionizing radiation, psychochemicals, and hallucinogens and drugs used during the Gulf War. What? This is only 5 of 10 pages? This is only half? And we're only at 1994? So we're already at 1994? 1995, U.S. government admits that it had offered Japanese war criminals and scientists who had performed human medical experiments salaries and immunity from prosecution for exchange for data on biological warfare research. In 1995, Dr. Garth Nicholson uncovers evidence that biological agents were used in Gulf War, had been manufactured in Houston, Texas, Boca Raton, Florida, and tested on prisoners at the Texas Department of Corrections. On the 3rd of October 1995, President Clinton publicly apologized to the thousands of people who became victims of MK-Ultra and other mind control experimental programs. 1996, the Department of Defense admits that Desert Storm soldiers were exposed to chemical agents. 1997, 88 members of Congress signed a letter demanding an investigation into bioweapons use and Gulf War syndrome. All right. In 1947, the Navy conducts the first known post-war mind control program, Project Chapter, which continued the drug experiments. Decades later, journalists and investigators still haven't uncovered much information about this project or indeed about any of the military's other excursion into this field. We know that the Army eventually founded Operations Third Chance and Derby Hat. Other project names remain mysterious, though the existence of these programs is unquestionable. Operation Chatter was a highly classified Navy program to search for a truth drug, began. Well, if you want to have a truth drug, all you got to do is serve alcohol. That tells you the whole truth. They were looking for a way to make someone talk fast in the event of a security emergency. These experiments used barbiturates, amphetamines, and heroin. The drugs were supplied by the Bureau of Narcotics and Pharmaceutical Companies. Some of the experimental subjects, including the scientists themselves, and mostly students. 1953, Project Chatter was abandoned by the Navy. Project Bluebird was approved by the first CIA Director, Roscoe Hillenkoetter. He also approved the use of unvouchered funds. Unvouchered funds still happen today, which means some of these things still happen today, to pay for its sensitive areas. This began the CIA's first structural behavioral program. Their goals consist of controlling an individual to the point where he would do our bidding against his will, and even against fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation. Some of their experimental subjects, including North Korean prisoners of war and suspected double agents, and probably political enemies. The newly formed CIA plunged into this cesspool in 1950 with Project Bluebird, Re-Christian Artichoke in 1951. To establish a cover story for this research, the CIA funded a propaganda effort designed to convince the world that the communist bloc had devised insidious new methods of reshaping the human will. The CIA's own efforts could therefore, if exposed, be be explained as an attempt to catch up with the Soviet and Chinese work. So that's the reason why they're claiming that the Chinese have a ultrasonic missile system. Very interesting. The primary promoter of this line was one Edwin Hunter, a CIA contract employee operating undercover as a journalist and later a prominent member of the John Birch Society. Hunter was an OSS veteran of the Chinese theater. The same spawning grounds which produced Richard Helms, Howard Hunt, Mitch Welbell, Fred Chrisman, Paul Helliwell, and a host of other noteworthies who came to dominate that strange land where worlds of intelligence and so-called right-wing extremism meet. Hunter offered brainwashing as an explanation for numerous confessions signed by American prisoners of war during Korean War. Generally, UN recanted upon prisoners' repatriation. These confessions alleged that the United States had used germ warfare in the Korean conflict, a claim which the American public of the time found impossible to accept. Many years later, however, investigative reporters discovered that Japan's germ warfare specialists, who wreaked incalculable terror on the conquered Chinese during World War II, had been mustered into American national security apparatus, and that was the knowledge gleaned from the Japan's horrifying germ warfare experiment was probably WAS used in Korea, just as the brainwashed soldiers had indicated. Thus, we know that the entire brainwashing scare of the 1950s constituted a CIA hoax perpetrated upon the American public. CIA Deputy Director Richard Helms admitted as much when in 1963 he told the Warren Commission that Soviet mind control research consistently lagged years behind American efforts. Operation Artichoke, 1951. Project Bluebird was renamed Project Artichoke. The CIA director approved a liaison with the Army and Navy who were interested in finding a truth drug. Another liaison was formed with the U.S. Air Force who wanted to study interrogation techniques. Information was also exchanged with the Canadian and British governments. Some of Project Artichoke's experiment subjects included suspected agents, suspected double agents, people who had known a reason for deception, American college students, supposedly for more benign testing. So you want to go get paid for testing new products, do you? And foreigners, since the CIA was more likely to try certain procedures out on them rather than American citizens, terminal or to the death experiments were usually carried out in other countries. According to Boart, the control method was used on 2 agents involving drug and hypnosis, which is narco-hypnosis. The subjects were hypnotically regressed and made to relive past experiences. Post-hypnotic suggestions were given to induce total amnesia of their interrogations. The CIA called this experiment very successful. I hope you are paying attention to this. You may not realize it, but you could yourself become a victim of this. Be called a murderer because of the things that you believe in. Locked up in jail and be given post-hypnotic suggestions. These guys talking about the CIA being in their heads? Maybe you should question whether they are crazy after all. Project Castigate in 1952 began when the Navy and the CIA teamed up to test a secret potion that consisted of a depressant, a stimulant, and an active ingredient in marijuana. The drugs were to be administered over a 3-day period. The experiment was carried out in Germany at a CIA base on a military installation. Experimental subjects were also one known double agent, one suspected double agent, and 3 defectors. Project Castigate was considered a failure. Alright, Project NK Naomi in 1952. With MK standing for mind control. TSS's agreement with Special Force Operations or Special Operations Division of the Army's Biological Research Center at Fort Detrick, Maryland. SOD's job was to produce germ weapons for the CIA's use. I, Boyd E. Graves, J.D., have been asked to give my perspective with regard to the federal program MK Naomi. MK Naomi is the code for the development of AIDS. The MK portion stands for the 2 co-authors of the AIDS virus. Robert Maneker and Paul Coton. The Naomi portion stands for Negroes are only momentary individuals. The U.S. government continues to orchestrate silence from the very top echelons of Congress and military. At present, there is no accountability. The good people will ultimately create a tsunami of pup. No, that's not what's going to happen. Are you proud to be American now? MK Ultra. 1953, a CIA program for covert use of biological and chemical weapons began. Boart states, according to CIA documents, MK Ultra was an umbrella project for funding sensitive projects and covered policy and procedures for the use of biochemicals in clandestine operations. MK Ultra was exempted from normal CIA financial controls and allowed TSS to begin research projects without contracts or written agreements. TSS stands for Technical Service Staff and was an agency referred to as the Gadget Wizard, similar to that what Q is to James Bond. As usual, MK Delta and MK Naomi have already been set up prior to the CIA being given official permission for MK Ultra. MK Delta became the operational side of MK Ultra. MK Ultra focused on drugs, specifically LSD, since the CIA had a phobia about LSD ending up in the hands of the Russians. The CIA wanted to use LSD as a weapon. The Russians and the Cold War were used as a national security excuse for most of CIA's actions. The CIA studied hundreds of other drugs besides LSD, as well as experimenting with radiation, electroshock, psychology, sociology, anthropology, psychiatry, harassment substances, and paramilitary devices and materials. It appears that the scientists enjoyed trying these drugs upon themselves, but they also were used on many hospital patients, volunteers, mostly students, inmates who were usually paid for their participation with more drugs, for their participation. If you didn't catch that. And eventually, anyone the CIA could get without their consent, of course. The CIA scientists even reduced themselves to misting and spraying unwitting American citizens as they walked down busy city streets. Later they would study how they could manipulate genes and develop compounds that could simulate heart attack and stroke. many more are there? There's a few more left. All right. MK Search, 1964. MK Ultra became MK Search. Many sub-projects stayed under MK Ultra, while the most sensitive behavioral experiments went to MK Search. These experiments were conducted on prisoners, terminal cancer patients, and people who were described as mentally defectives. They also used radar waves on monkey brains, which risked cooking their brains. And one might ask, who is conducting this Havana syndrome that is going on anyway? Is it the U.S. government itself? One scientist took the head of one monkey and tried to attach it to the body of another. Other experiments involved studying telepathy, radio frequencies, and memory. MK Search continued in the early 1970s, and more experiments were performed under ORD, the Office of Research and Development. Some of these experiments consisted of implanting electrodes into the brains of cats, dogs, and reptiles and controlling the animals remotely. Animal experiments were always and still are performed first and heinously, but we do not hear much of these atrocities. Controlling the animals remotely by implanting electrodes, and this was in the early 1970s. Imagine what they could do to human beings in 2021. According to Boart, the following agencies were involved in behavior modification and behavior research projects: the Defense Department, Department of Labor, the National Science Foundation, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Health, Education and Welfare, and the National Institute of Mental Health, the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration under the Department of Justice. All of the above agencies were named in secret CIA documents as those providing research to cover for MK Ultra. Will you trust your government? What branch of government do you trust? Often/Chitwick, 1967 or 1968 project Often/Chitwick was initiated by the Army Chemical Corps and the CIA's Office of Research and Development to create a new drug compound, or to create new drug compounds that could be used offensively. Hallucinogens were tested on inmates at Pennsylvania, but very little known about the experiment. CIA documents mention several laboratory accidents in which the drug, designated as EA-3167, produced prolonged psychotic effects in laboratory personnel. U.S. Army dispenses Bacillus subtilis variant Niger throughout the New York City subway systems. More than 1 million civilians are exposed when Army scientists drop light bulbs filled with bacteria onto ventilation grates. I believe we read that. I think so. This is the rest of this is a summary. Okay. So you want to sing, as they say, God Bless America? I am telling you, great tribulation is coming upon the whole world, the whole Gentile world. And very likely on the United States first, and I'll tell you why I think so. I'm not saying it is going to happen on the United States first. There are a couple of scriptures that suggest that the farthest west are going to be first. Let me show you 3 scriptures. Um, we'll go to Isaiah 66 first. Not Isaiah 60, Isaiah 60. Strong's Concordance and verse 8. This is at the time when the lights from the sun will be turned off. Western civilization is making themselves increasingly dependent upon solar power. Well, if they would have bothered to read scripture, they would have realized that that would be a terrible, terrible mistake. Arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of not the Lord, Jehovah. His name doesn't even sound like the Lord, does it? No. Is risen upon you. Remember, this is the future glory of Zion, so it's going to, this light, this great light is going to shine upon Zion. Why? Because darkness shall cover the whole earth, and gross darkness to people, that would be the Gentiles. But Jehovah shall rise upon you, and his glory shall be seen upon you. And the what? Goey, Gentiles, will be forced to come to that light. Why? Because their lights are turned off. And what are they going to be forced to do? Bring all Israel back home to Zion. And they're going to be servants of the people of Israel, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Look about you, they are all gathered together, they come to you. Your sons will come from afar, and your daughters shall be nursed. And then you shall see and flow together, and your heart shall be in awe. And your tents will be enlarged, O Israel, because the abundance, noise, murmuring, the roar of the Mediterranean Sea shall be not converted, but overthrown. Overthrown. King James Version. Wow. When the armies of the Gentiles try to attack you, bam! Here comes darkness. We go down here, and who is first to bring these people from afar? The coastal regions will wait, and the ships of Tarshish will come first. So the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea will have to wait, because the ships of Tarshish will be first to bring your sons from afar. Ships of Tarshish. Christopher Columbus ships were ships of Tarshish. You know that. If you don't, you should know that. The Iberian Peninsula was where Tarshish was located. And Christopher Columbus ships left from that very port. They will be first in line. Why? Is it because the farthest west gets tribulation and anguish first? Well, if we go to Isaiah 66, it seems to provide the answer. Shall we go there? Talking about the Gentiles here, and by fire and by sword, Jehovah will judge, not plead, will judge, Shaphat. Jehoshaphat means Jehovah will judge. Shaphat means to judge with all flesh, and the slain of Jehovah shall be many. Those that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree. Hold on. After one in the midst. After one in the midst. Who knows whether or not this is a tree are involved. I can't find it where it says so. In the midst, eating swine's flesh. Oh, I bet this is talking about the people who desecrated the temple with swine's flesh. The sons of Greece. That be in Zechariah 9, I believe. For I know their works and their thoughts, and it shall come that I will gather all the Goy and the tongues, and they will come, and they will see my glory, and I will set a sign among them. And I will send escapees, 2 witnesses, to the Gentiles. This also means fugitives. To the Gentiles. And who pops up first? So the rest of the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea are going to have to wait, because the ships of Tarshish are going to be first to bring. Oh, yes! To Tarshish first. We just saw it in Isaiah 60. And then the pool and Lud to draw the bow, to Tubal and Yavan, that would be Greece. You know what Tubal is. And to the coastlands, that would be the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea, to hear my fame, to see my glory. And they, the 2 witnesses, shall declare my glory to the Gentiles, and they, the 2 witnesses, shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto Jehovah out of the Gentiles upon Sus, which are birds, upon Sus, birds, and in every kind of chariot known to man, and in covered wagons, cars, or horse-pulled covered wagons, it makes no difference. And upon mules, and also on swift beasts, like dromedaries, it says dromedaries, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, says Jehovah. And the children of Israel will be an offering in a clean vessel unto the house of Jehovah. And the people of Israel, this is misunderstood. The people of Israel will be priests and Levites. They will be a kingdom of priests. And as the new heavens and the new earth will I make, shall remain before me, says not the Lord but Jehovah. And so your seed and your name will stand. And it will come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says Jehovah. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that had transgressed against me. And you can take a look at them in your governments today. Them. For their worm shall die. Does not say dies not. It says shall die. And their fire will be quenched. And they will be an abhorrence unto all flesh. If you love America, you are the problem. If you love this world, you are the problem. These are my brothers and sisters. These people. They are the ones that I love. And I hope to be with them in the great migration back to Eretz Israel.